Hey guys, Sean here. So today I'm going to be reviewing the iPhone 11 Pro Max, which is a bit of a mouthful as much as it is a handful as well. And the reason I'm doing it after all this time is I've had the device now for just over a year since I got it on launch day. But obviously the new iPhones are coming out, or they're just around the corner, or at least we believe they are. And a lot of you are probably going to be in the market to potentially pick up one of these in clearance at some of the mobile phone networks or from Apple Direct, or you might be looking around to get an idea of what they're like on places like eBay and stuff like that. So I figured I'd give you my honest review on the device, how it's been for this last year, and what my thoughts are on whether or not you should buy it. So first things first, the iPhone 11 Pro Max is a very big device, but it looks and feels premium. Straight away, I upgraded from my iPhone XR and I got this thing, and the reason why is I planned on keeping it for about 3 years, and fingers crossed I'll be able to. The screen itself is really sharp, looks absolutely beautiful, and the viewing angles are fantastic. And then the build quality is really top notch, although it's very Apple and it has a lot of Apple drawbacks on it, and I'll come to those later on in the review. When it comes to power, there isn't anything I've not been able to do with this device yet. It's extremely capable, and pretty much any kind of gaming or anything else I've done on this device has just kept up and kept pace with it throughout. Any form of gaming is just really kept up with it, and I've really enjoyed it. And one of the reasons I went with the Pro Max model was because I wanted that larger screen, because I felt that I was going to probably do a little bit more gaming with it. Hooking it up with an Xbox controller and gaming on this thing is absolutely superb. Although it just feels a little bit too small when I do things like game streaming from my PC. That screen's just a little bit too cramped, although it can be quite nice for some games. So one of the massive drawbacks with this device when it comes to things like gaming is it gets extremely hot. And again, that's because of Apple, really cramming so much into it and going for that really small, thin form factor. And it just doesn't do a very good job with heat, kind of like any Apple product. But to the point it can get quite uncomfortable, especially if you use it without a case. The other drawback of that as well is you kind of get in that mindset of, if I'm doing a lot of gaming on it and it's really eating into that and just kind of putting a strain on the battery, it's probably going to destroy the future lifespan of the device. So I've started to game a lot less on this, which is really disappointing, and that's more out of fear that my battery is just going to get absolutely decimated over time. Speaking of battery, my battery gets me pretty much a full day, and that's not just a working day, that is literally wake up in the morning, get to bed at night, and I've still got a decent amount of battery on there. Even over time, that battery has remained fantastic. When I first got it, I was so blown away by how good the battery is in this device. I came from an iPhone XR, which got me a really good battery anyway, but this thing it takes the cake. It is fantastic. I think if I was using it just on average, I could probably get away with 2 days of usage and not have to worry. But knowing that I get an absolute full day no matter what I'm doing on the device is really handy, especially, well, in the future, if you get to work away again or anything like that, you know that if you have to go to a meeting, you're pretty much going to come back with a decent amount of battery on there. Now, one of the things on there that I kind of figured I wasn't going to enjoy that much, because iPhone cameras have been relatively average for years now, and then they slapped 3 lenses in there and it just kind of seemed a bit overkill. But actually, one of my favourite features is the camera setup on this thing. And I'll explain a bit more why that is. I have a toddler, and I also have a little baby, and trying to take pictures of children is never particularly easy because they're always doing something like this, like say cheese, oh, they're looking away and they're moving and all of that, and it gets extremely frustrating. Now, one thing that I absolutely adore about Apple's products is live photos, and they're a lifesaver, especially if you're trying to take photos of anything that's moving. So if you've got pets, if you've got children, which are basically just evil, untamed pets, they're so handy because you can choose that best shot. The camera setup on the iPhone is just fantastic. I really like it. On these Pro models, I use every single one of the lenses, and I never expected that I would. I always figured I'd just use your main normal wide lens, but the amount of times I've used the ultra wide lens, especially again with children, they tend to get quite close. You go, right, I'm going to take a picture, and they move closer. Switching to that ultra wide lens just gives me that extra space, and it allows me to get a really good picture. It's brilliant as well for wherever out anywhere. I can just get a really good shot of everything that's happening. And the telephoto lens, again, children have a habit of just running away and then turning around for a photo. It just lets you kind of get a better zoom on that without losing the quality. And again, on all 3 of those lenses, you get live photo. So unlike other devices that I've used in the past which have similar things to live photo, if you use any of the, other lenses, you then lose out on that ability to use things like their live photo. On the iPhone, you get that live photo across all 3 of the lenses, which is just brilliant. And this year, they've actually got a decent quality. So one of the worst things about the iPhone has been the camera, in my opinion. It's always been a good camera, and you get decent shots, but when you start zooming in or anything like that, the quality just falls apart. This year, they have nailed it. You get really good quality, and I am pretty much thrilled with it. I never have to use my DSLR anymore just because it's big, it's bulky, and with kids, trying to get it set up is just a nightmare. This thing does what I need it to. And that kind of brings me on to the video camera. And Apple have nailed the video camera on these things for years now, and this is no exception. I use this camera for all of the YouTube videos at the moment, and eventually we will upgrade it because there are some noticeable things, especially with like noise and bits like that. But the camera on it is superb. Shooting in 4K 60 frames per second, it just looks brilliant. And again, anywhere we've been with the kids or anything like that, it's captured some amazing videos that, you know what, we'll look back on for years to come, and the quality is just there. So camera setup on this iPhone, absolutely top notch, and one of my favorite things about it. Speaking of notch, that's there again, and love it or hate it, you kind of get used to it. And even though I am now used to the notch, I don't like it. There's some things where it just gets in the way. There's some games where it just kind of crops out part of the HUD, and that's just really frustrating. And granted, you could say it's laziness on the developer's part, but it's there and it's in the way. And even though I am used to it, and especially after all these years using things with a notch, it's still there and it still catches my attention from time to time. And I just don't like it, and I'm really, really eager to see the day when the notch just goes away. But then on the flip side, the notch brings us Face ID, and Face ID is superb. Now granted, it's not great in this day and age of masks and having to cover your face up, but for me, Face ID, it was one of those things that just put me off straight away, because I figured, you know what, Touch ID worked great, different viewing angles, you didn't have to worry about it, you didn't have to worry about using it in the dark. But Face ID took my breath away when I first used it, and to this day it's just gotten better and better and better. Unlocks pretty much instantly, it always gets me, even at awkward angles and stuff like that, and it just seems so reliable, and I absolutely love Face ID. So I suppose it's a trade-off I'm willing to make. I just wish the notch would die and go away, but we're probably a few years away from that. So there's quite a few things there that I like and I love, but there's also some things that I really, really hate about this iPhone. And the first one is, it's just Apple's, I don't know if it's laziness or complacency, but in their design now, especially with the iPhones, you have to use it with a case. And I know some people probably won't, and it feels really nice to use without a case, but there's so many little drawbacks that drive me absolutely mad when I don't use it with a case. And the first one is the camera bump on it. As much as I like the camera array on it, it just sticks out so much. If you put it on a table or a flat surface, it just bumps around a lot, and it's obviously putting more pressure on the lenses, and I do worry about that. With a case, it protects the lenses and it just makes the iPhone flat, and it just seems really frustrating. And I get it, there's only so much room they can put in these iPhones, but stop chasing thinness, for God's sake, Apple. It's just one of the worst things about them. The other thing is the volume rocker, or the silence switch on the top. And I really like the silence switch, it comes in really handy, but if you use it without a case, it is forever flicking on and off in your pocket. And again, one of those things that just drives me mad. Why is it either not more sturdy and stable so it doesn't clip without a bit of force, or can't they just recess it a little bit more? It just seems crazy that you have to use a case to stop that sort of thing going. And then another drawback of the iPhone without a case is it's uncomfortable to use after a while. So if you do any form of gaming or anything that's going to start really kind of bumping up that processor, the iPhone gets hot, and I mean uncomfortably hot. Now with a case, it's bearable and you can use it and you can feel that heat coming through it, but it's not too bad. But on the times I've done any gaming without a case on it, it gets just too uncomfortable to hold for any long length of time. So another drawback, and it just seems that Apple are relying on people slapping a case on the device, and that just doesn't seem right, especially when you're paying as much as this thing costs. And speaking of design, I went with the Pro Max. I knew what size I was getting, but the weight of this thing, it's a beastie, it's a heavy boy, and it's uncomfortable to use with one hand. So you can use it with one hand, but Apple software doesn't necessarily feel intuitive for that, especially on large screens. So obviously Apple, I don't know what it is with their reluctance. They gave us widgets, but everything has to go along the top and it just drops down slowly. I just wish we had something more like an Android interface where those most commonly used apps, I could just pull them all down towards the bottom. And I know I have the dock, but I want to have all my apps towards the bottom so that way I can stretch and reach them, rather than on a device this size kind of having to switch over, use two hands to be able to tap on it. And it seems crazy. We have reachability in there, which is great. You can drop things down so you can, tap on what you need to, but it doesn't seem as intuitive as the Android alternatives. Samsung and Huawei, for example, you swipe up from one of the corners and you get a smaller, confined version of the phone, and it's just so easy to use, the interface. Apple doesn't really have anything like that. Again, in the keyboard, when you go to message with one hand, you've still got to stretch all the way across to the left-hand side. So if, like me, you're using it with your right hand, you then have to stretch across to then drop the keyboard and drag it across, and it just doesn't seem intuitive. And then there's the weight of it. Even when you're just viewing something or watching something, I tend to hold it and then rest it on my pinky, and it just puts a lot of strain. And there's been so many times where I've had a really sore finger, and it kind of makes me go, what? How have I done that? And then I realise it's just the way that I'm using the iPhone. So if you do go down this route, it is a very heavy device and very large as well. And I do regret going for the larger size, and I wish I'd just gone for the standard Pro or just the standard iPhone 11. But you know what? It varies from person to person. You might like the larger size. For me, it doesn't offer enough extra real estate. It doesn't offer me enough extra to be worth it, so I wish I'd gone for the Pro. And I suppose in summary, that kind of brings it all together really, is that it is a big device. It's capable of a lot of things, but the package it's all just slammed into just feels a little bit too confining for the device. And the software isn't tailored to it, and that just drives me mad. On previous Plus models, when you tilt them over across into landscape, the whole device moves into it. Whereas on this, for example, you'll come out of an app that you're using in landscape, you then got to flip your iPhone over or navigate it in kind of upside down mode, and then go into another app that's using it in landscape. And it just doesn't seem intuitive, and it's very un-Apple, and I don't understand what's going on. They bring out bigger devices with the iPhone lineup and not doing much with it, and not making it easy for users to use, and that puts me off that. In hindsight, like I said, I wish I'd gone for a smaller model, and now that the SE's out, I'd much rather have that, because those things that I would like to do on my iPhone, like gaming for example, I do worry about what it's doing to the battery life, and it just becomes uncomfortable to use. It just heats up massively, and it's a bit of a drawback. And that's not to say the iPhone's a bad device. I've really enjoyed using it. For the last year or so, it has been a fantastic camera, a great media consumption device. But for the cost that I paid for it, out of all my gadgets and out of all the things that I've bought, it's definitely the one that I feel the worst about, because it just costs so much and the price point is just astronomical, and I wouldn't recommend anyone buy a device that costs that much when it's a phone. But it has cost a lot of money, and it's definitely not worth it. It's been a great device to use, but in summary, I'd say go for something like the iPhone SE if you're not going to be using all those features. But something like just the standard Pro or even the 11 would work out great. Now, the question is, what's going to happen to the prices on these once the new iPhones come out? And I would imagine, like tends to happen every single year, what we will see is these will drop in price to get onto clearance, and you'll see loads of people selling them second hand. Now, a lot of the time, the worries that you get when it's second-hand devices are what's happened to the battery, what's the performance like of this, and does it hold up? And in all honesty, if you're going on what I've done with it, and I can be quite a power user when it comes to my phone, my battery is at 95% on its battery health, so it's still doing really well, and the battery holds up to this day. It does really good. So I wouldn't worry too much about batteries being destroyed in these devices. Unlike previous year's models and stuff like that, the Pro Max holds up really well when it comes to batteries, so I wouldn't worry about that. Things like performance, the chip in this thing is going to be good to go for a very long time. It is more than capable of handling pretty much anything you throw at it. Like I said, it's cramped into a tiny little package, but at the end of the day, if you use it with a case, then you don't really have to worry about the heat too much. And you know what? It's going to keep up with pretty much any applications that come out for the next few years. So if you do find one secondhand at a decent price, it's worthwhile going for. The screen quality is fantastic. I can't see Apple doing a massive amount in terms of screen changes. It looks like we're not going to get our increased refresh rate, but you know, who knows? So like I said, I've really enjoyed this device. It has a fantastic camera, battery life is brilliant, it looks and feels premium. There are just those few things to be wary of. Heat on it, that's just one of those things. Unfortunately, you're not going to get away with it when it's a small compact device like this. The size and the weight of it, and more so the weight, it is uncomfortable to use with one hand, so be prepared that if you're going to be in situations where you can't use it with two hands, again, for me, having a toddler that jumps onto me, having a baby strapped to my chest and stuff like that, it becomes quite frustrating and not being able to use it one-handed, and that's just a drawback of my lifestyle. It might not apply to you, it might, so it's worthwhile bearing in mind. But overall, it is a really good device, but anything from the iPhone 11 range is a good device, so you know what? Do with that what you will. So as always, I really hope you've enjoyed that and it's been a helpful video. Hit that like and subscribe button so you can catch more that comes up in the future. I see we've got the iPhone 12s just around the corner, so fingers crossed we will have a few videos of that. In the meantime, stay safe and we'll see you soon. Ta-ra!